Good day, everyone. Today's video is following up with the West Memphis data set, primarily focusing on a lot of the questions surround can I identify change from one time point to another, be it January to February, in our case April to May, or from a time point of last year of comparing May of 2022 to May of 2021. You can do year-to-date statistics and change with that as well and trying to make comparisons. Oftentimes from a comp stat process, agencies follow counts, look at percent change. You oftentimes hear about this in the news. Politicians speak on this heavily. There's a lot of issues surrounding just simply using percent change. With that, that's kind of the focus of today's video. I'm not going to get into heavy detail about some of the issues, but Andy Wheeler summarizes it very well of percent change encourages chasing the noise and some of the issues surrounding when you rely on only reporting percent change, the issues with it. I will link to these in the video, but these tables have the nice examples of when you look at counts and percent change. You can oftentimes see, especially if you go from the example from robbery of a business year to date 1 to 4, there's a 300% increase. If all you heard was that 300% increase, you're going to think this is a terrible problem and we should do something immediately about it. In reality, it truly just moved from 1 to 4. That's where it becomes some of these issues of understanding the counts and the distribution of counts of crime and data as a whole with what we're looking at. And that's why Andy brings up and compares the metric of using a Poisson distribution, and we'll use this formula here in Excel to identify significant changes from one time point to another. I'll link to some of his other blogs on it as well, and he even brings up Isaac Van Patten and the kind of the discussion surrounding the count data and overall C-test to E-test. Andy looks at all this, makes comparisons. That's why I'm not going to get heavily into it. I'll post to it. It's on there for you to read and get into. With that, let's get into our data for West Memphis. Same as before in the prior video, I even have the pivot tab still here. There's just nothing set up in it. So what I want to do is I pretty much take our month so I know across each month what this looks like in terms of count. So we could simply just use this data here and look at are there significant changes from month in West Memphis. Given this is a police department that we're working with in this example, they also come with a police zone name. Think about police atom, district. There's a lot you can use here depending on your jurisdiction. You can even toss in if it's your block, street segment, block group, census tract. There's a lot you can do here that's interchangeable. I've been using this with tract, zip code, a couple other different spatial units of analysis with a similar process of identifying significant change over time or comparison points. With that, you can see I already have the data field highlighted that I want to copy and paste, but it is nice since I had a link chart to it, to the pivot table specifically. You can see how it updates and kind of the counts based on month for each individual zone. With that, to make life a bit easier and to clean it up, I'm just going to copy this table here. So we have our zone across each month with individual counts. I'm going to open a new sheet, paste this in here. And for our purposes today, I'm going to go ahead and delete this second row that does not have a zone attached, but we have incidents or offenses within it, I should say. So I'm going to go ahead and hit delete here. And strikingly, what we oftentimes want to do is look at percent change from month to month to month. It could be January of this year of 2022 compared to January of 2021. You can do this a number of different ways. Since this data set's solely for calendar year of 2021, I'm going to do an example of comparing February to March, or February to January, then March to February, just to have a couple different examples. So historically, what a lot of people like to get into, myself included when I was learning all this, like understanding change, a big one is just to look at percent change. So if we do this, the traditional way to look at percent change is we're going to do equal sign, new, new subtracting our old. So our February, we want to compare to our January. So our post, subtracting our pre, and then you divide by the pre, January. So with that, we know right now it's about 26% decrease in February compared to January. I'm going to just double click on that little green box. It's going to take that same calculation and just repeat it for each row. Now you might look at this and think, well, that's not identifiable percentage. If you come up to your number tab up here and just hit percent, it'll transfer that for you. And you can see now 26%, 49% decreases are fairly significant, especially looking at those numbers. But we don't know in terms of how significant they are in terms of the distribution of what we would expect. So with that, we're going to take that same formula and I'm just going to copy and paste it from Andy's website. I'm going to paste it below so we can just look at it. We're just going to be taking the square root of our post, which in this example would be February, and subtracting it from our square root of January and multiplying that by 2. This is going to give us, based on Poisson distribution, a nice metric if you're familiar with z-scores and where values fall. We're going to be looking at values that are over 3, so essentially that 99% threshold we want to identify as significant. There's a movement within social science to even move away from using the 95% to even 99% as kind of our basis for the golden standard. So with that, I'm just going to put our z metric up here. And again, to calculate this, we're truly taking 2, and if you're not familiar, you can just do parentheses, or if you want to put it in there and have them multiply our square root. Our post is February, and from that we're going to subtract the square root of our pre, which is January. And you can see now, unfortunately, and you might freak out, this happens a lot with dates when you just insert a column next to one that has defined number format. It came back as a percent, because each one of these cells, if you look up here, is still registering as a percentage. Easy way around this, I'm going to highlight the whole column E, come up here, click General again, and it's going to shift that for me. And now I'm just going to have that copy itself down. I'm going to change up the decimal places here. And you can easily see that we do have 2 of the zones in February had a significant reduction or decrease in offenses. So with that, since there's only 4 zones here, you can easily highlight these. So if we see decrease, that's oftentimes a good thing. So you might want to highlight these or do a fill of green. Just think about what you're trying to show there. Red oftentimes is an aggravating. So if you see increases, you have that. So even though in the southeast you saw a 15% increase, which some people might look at and think, wow, we really need to spend some time and effort in there. If you look at the count, you're moving from 34 to 39, so in reality, only 5 offense difference. Percent-wise, that gets bumped up to about 15%, but when we look at it in terms of the metric and the distribution, it's not even over a 1 or even a 2, to where if we think at the 95% level, what might be considered, but right now we're good to go, and we know that there's not a significant increase there. Given that the other 3 did see decreases in the month of February, police might want to take a look at that one and just think what's going on in that specific zone for February as a case study kind of analysis, but overall we did see significant reductions in 2 of those districts or zones. With that, now let's do March compared to February. So I'm going to insert a column here. Again, we're going to do a percent change and just look at this, and then we're going to also calculate the z-score metric to make our life easier when it comes to interpretation. So again, I'm just labeling those up there for us. So if we wanted to do our percent, and I'm going to calculate this a different way so you don't have to always go up and do the percent at the top. But if we take our new data, which is March, subtract our February, and then divide by February, and at the end, you just times it by 100 to get that percent. Same process of you going up there and clicking on the number. Copy this down. I'm going to go ahead and change these in terms of decimal places. And you can see here we do have quite a few increases percent-wise in crime. If you look at the count, we can see that. So each individual zone did see count-wise quite an increase in the actual count itself. The bigger ones being about 78, 74, and 79%. With that, let's see what these actually mean. So here, again, we're going to use that Z metric that Andy put out of using a Poisson distribution and trying to understand what's going on across these 4 zones themselves. So 2 times the square root of our post, which is March, subtracting that from our square root of our pre, which is February. Close that off. We can see here that we do have 3 out of the 4 did have significant increases. So again, as we labeled those as green, we can see here that in March, and if you think, I'm just thinking time-wise, calendar year, without knowing too much, crime starts to increase come spring to summer months, oftentimes just based on general routine activities, so not a huge shock there, but we do see that these are significant increases across those themselves. It gives you some talking power that's very different than just always discussing percent change, because as we see in this table that Andy uses as an example, if we broke this down, our same data set and offenses based on the type, we can see that we do have very different counts. So a lot of these have small counts, so when there is change, the percent's going to be much larger. So with that, this is an easy example of how to do just zone and month with it. Out of curiosity, I'm now interested in doing one based on offense type. So if we come back to our pivot table, if I come into our offense description, apply this as a filter, and say I come in here and I want to look at simple ag assault and leave out the familial correctional officer, everything with that, and true just ag assault itself, hit OK. And you can see in here that even across some of the months, we don't even have any ag assaults in every zone. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to open up the same sheet. I'm just going to paste it below so we can still see the formula that we're working with. With that, it's going to create some issues with this one, so I'm just going to hide these for now, come back to it at a later point. But for now, if I wanted to, let's look later in the year. Let's do August to September, which we see summer. We have 0 to 6, 1 to 10, 1 to 3, 14 to 2. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this same one that had no zone attached. I'm going to insert 2 columns here. One again is going to be the percent change, and then our Z metric here for comparison that we want over 3 in terms of the distribution. If you have questions on that in terms of the distribution, please read Andy's material. If you still have questions with the distribution, reach out to me and I can help and send some resources to better understand that. But if we look at percent change, let's go ahead and take our new minus our old, divided by our old, copy that down. We have division by 0, which is expected. But with that, change that to a percentage. And here we end up seeing, even though it's division by 0, that there is quite a bit of change with that. So if we have any questions, feel free to reach out. So with that, if we get into now the metric, similar process, 2 times the square root of our post, which is September, subtracting the square root of our pre, which is our August, close that off, and we can see based on the distribution, we do have 3 out of the 4 zones in September saw significant change. In the Northeast, we saw a significant reduction in ag assaults. You saw that by the negative 86%, but with our metric, it's still negative, so we know that it is a significant and meaningful reduction in ag assaults in that zone. But both in the Southeast and Southwest zones, we saw a significant increase in the amount of ag assaults. With that in Southeast, you can see it went from 1 to 10, and in Southwest, it went from 0 to 6. With that, these are offenses based on the data provided. It's a nice way to visualize and look at the data itself. So it kicks out some of the noise of the larger increases. Even though we saw here in Northwest, there was a 200% increase, which again, if that's all we were looking at and we saw that number, there would probably be a lot of backlash if that was in the news media or at all. Seeing a 200% increase, hearing that, seeing that sounds like a significant change. Oh gosh, we need to make change with it. Count wise, we can see it's truly just moving from 1 to 3. And then when we put it in the distribution of a Poisson based model, you can see that it doesn't even approach even 2, which is kind of our 95, let alone 3 of the 99 part. So if there are questions with this, please let me know, reach out. Truly just an example of what Andy highlights and kind of moving away from percent change and understanding where this falls within a Poisson distribution and using the metrics within this formula up here to identify and flag significant values when you're monitoring, be it from year to year, month to month, or calendar end dates, whatever you want to do in terms of count comparison. I would highly recommend following Andy's website in general, getting on the listserv, but it's a good way to follow change within a jurisdiction. If there's any questions, feel free to reach out. Until next time, take care.